Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast, where you will get tips to expand your LNC skills. I'm Pat Iyer, the host of the show. Every week, you will see or hear interviews with experts and tips from them as well as from me that will help you develop the knowledge that you need to succeed in this exciting field. I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts about the show by going to podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. Look for a red button on the homepage. When you click on that button, you can leave me a question or share a compliment or a suggestion about the show. I want to hear from you. Coming up March 14, 15, and 16, 2024, join us for the 9th LNC Success Online Conference. This is an event where you can get support, a community, and knowledge about the specialized field of legal nurse consulting. Get your ticket by going to this link, lnc.tips/March 2024 virtual. And if you see this podcast or hear this podcast after that date, go to the link and you'll be able to invest in the recordings. I'll see you there. Now, let's go to the show. Welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I have with me today Jennifer Dizon, who is going to be switching roles with me and asking me questions today as we focus on a technique that can be very useful for growing your legal nurse consulting business. And that is exhibiting at an attorney conference. It's something that I started doing in the early 1990s and continue to exhibit at one kind of conference or another, even today. So Jennifer, let's talk about your first question of me.
Hi, Pat. Thank you for having me with you and co-host. So we're going to talk about planning exhibits. First question, what should you consider about choosing the right event?
There are a lot of factors to think about. The first is to make sure that it's going to be an event with enough attorneys present, and they are attorneys who are in your ideal audience, your ideal target market. I made the mistake once of flying across the country with one of the nurses who worked for me to exhibit at a conference that was called RIMS, Risk Insurance Management. And I discovered at the process that it was not attorneys attending this conference. They were risk managers and insurance employees. It was not my ideal client. I didn't get any work from it. And I spent a significant amount of money between airfare and hotel and shipping materials to California from New Jersey, only to get nothing from it. So that's my first piece of advice, is to make sure that it is the right audience for you. And ideally, there are at least 100 attendees. If you walk into a room with 100 attendees at a conference, maybe 25% of them will stop by your booth. So if you're going to exhibit at a conference where there are fewer than 100 people, you may end up not walking away with the kinds of results that you're looking for. You do need to have good numbers there of anything that is at least 100 people. And I also recommend that you look for events that are at least a day long. Ideally, if it's an annual meeting, those would be a couple of days long, maybe 2 or 3. But for a full day, you'll have an opportunity to meet attorneys before the event starts, when they're doing registration, during the morning break, during the lunch break, during the afternoon break. And some exhibitors stay until the very end, when attorneys are walking out at the end of the day, in order to capture people's attention as they're leaving. So those are multiple opportunities that you have to talk to attorneys. The topic should also be one that deals with medical issues. If they are looking at new updates in constitutional law, that's not going to be the people you want to speak to. If it's a bar association meeting, and it's sometimes an attractive option to be at a bar event, it should be an event that focuses on a medical topic, such as a personal injury or medical malpractice topic. But if it is a broader bar association meeting, you might not find enough personal injury or medical malpractice attorneys or product liability attorneys to make it worthwhile. And it's also helpful if you look at whether the state has required continuing legal education, which draws more attorneys to events. If they are expected to maintain a certain number of hours per year, there tends to be a lot of activity towards the end of the year when people are trying to catch up when their credits are supposed to be turned in at the end of their calendar year, however they work it. There's a lot of people who are making up for lost time. I also recommend, when you think about choosing the right exhibit, that you look at how the trial lawyers group, if that's who's organizing this, encourages the attorneys to meet with the exhibitors. When they stand in front of the room and they say, our exhibitors help to support this event, it's important that you go around and meet those vendors, those exhibitors. When somebody stands in front of the room and tells them that, they are much more likely to walk around the room or walk around the edges of the room or the hallway or the exhibit room or wherever the vendors are set up. But if the trial lawyers group does not actively support the exhibitors by making that statement, then it shows. And then you are stuck in a hallway or another room with nobody coming by. And that's a recipe for some very unhappy exhibitors, including yourself. So the states or the organizations that understand that make a huge difference for you as an exhibitor. And then one other consideration is that in some organizations, you are allowed to get the mailing list of people who were present at that event. It's usually never phone numbers and emails. It's usually the name of the attendee, the law firm, and the address, so that you can do a follow-up mailing. Some associations say you can only use the list once, and they really mean that. They've got mechanisms in place to make sure that you are not violating that agreement, that you are only using the list once. If you use the list more than once, you can get caught, and then you can be banned from exhibiting at future events. And the way that they catch people is to put fictitious names on the list. So, for example, if you, Jennifer, are not an attorney, but you are in a law firm, that piece of mail that comes in for Jennifer gets flagged. Oh, we got that from Pat Iyer, exhibitor. But if Pat Iyer, exhibitor, mails to you more than once and is not allowed to mail more than once, then you get flagged because you're violating the terms of the agreement. Those are some of the considerations about selecting the right type of event. And I know that's a lot.
Yes, it's a lot of information, but all helpful when we're trying to choose which event to exhibit at. Pat, could you tell me about costs?
The costs vary all over the board, from a few hundred to several thousands of dollars. Often the costs are based on how sophisticated the trial lawyers group is. For example, if they do a lot of events and they recognize the opportunities for exhibitors to help subsidize those events, they may build in many opportunities for you to spend money, such as sponsoring a break or paying for the handouts or higher costs for booths that are closer to the food. Some groups are not all that focused on finding many opportunities for exhibitors to help subsidize their event. But one of the things that we've discovered post-COVID is that hotel costs have gone up significantly. The cost of the AV, the cost of the room, the cost of the food and beverage. So the attendees have to bear that cost and the exhibitors have to subsidize that cost. You've got the cost of the space as a consideration, that table, which could be basically a draped table, and that's all that you're provided. Usually a couple of chairs and a trash can. But that's just the beginning. Then there is the cost of the giveaways that you are going to be handing out, the cost of your marketing materials, the cost of the banner that you have, which are essentially long panels that you hook at the top and are behind your booth. There is the cost of a table drape, which is often something people use when they get used to doing exhibiting. It's a sheet, and the front of it is printed with the information about your company. I learned the hard way, don't pick a white drape, because people take their leaking coffee cups and put it down on your white tablecloth, and it leaves this nice round ring that is very difficult to get out. Navy blue and black are good colors for that reason. If you are exhibiting at a location that you can't drive to, then you've got a cost for shipping boxes of material. And you're trying to decide in advance, how much do I think I really need to ship? How heavy are my giveaways? I have in the past given out glass mugs. You can load up about 3 cases of a dozen per box glass mugs before you have run out of space on a dolly if you're driving somewhere. A dolly meaning a cart that is shaped like an L, and you put the boxes on the bottom part and then they lean up against the back of that hand cart. Those are expensive and they are heavy. A case of glass mugs is heavy. We've given out pads of paper, 60 pads per box. Attorneys love pads of paper, because often they are getting digital handouts and not books that they can write in. So they love to have pads. Pads are also expensive. And the pads are the ones that I gave out for years, were 8.5 by 11. And they had the company name at the top, all the contact information, and then along the bottom, the types of cases that we worked on. So every time the attorney wrote on that piece of paper, the attorney was seeing our company information on every sheet of that pad. So we talked about the cost of materials, the space, the postage or the shipping costs, the booth itself. The mailing list can sometimes be an additional cost that you have to pay for. Business cards, brochures, and the giveaways. It all adds up.
Yes, it does. That's a lot to consider in regards to cost and budget, what they provide, and then what we need to bring. Pat, what are some attractive giveaways?
Before we continue with the show, I'd like to share this special announcement with you. I'm Pat Iyer, and I am delighted to invite you to our March 14, 15, 16, 2024 LNC virtual conference. This is the 9th one that Barbara Levin and I have planned. And the topic that I want to share with you today is about creating a tight resume, how to avoid the landmines. You may be surprised to know that when I first became an entrepreneur, I wrote resumes for people, and I have been writing and editing and proofreading resumes ever since. If you had connected with me in 1987 when I became an entrepreneur, you could have bought a resume from me for $5. I don't price that service at this point at that level and don't offer it any longer. And I want to introduce Arlene Klopansky, who is an attorney at law from California. She is an author, contributed a couple of chapters to the Legal Nurse Consulting Principles and Practices, second edition, which I was the editor for, and is a colleague and friend. And we wanted to share with you today a little bit of tips about what we're planning to cover in our March 2024 conference.
Yes, I'm happy to be on this video with you, Pat. What kinds of tips are you going to share?
I will share with the people who attend the conference some of the things that I have learned from reading thousands of resumes. My business was involved with providing expert witnesses. I still do some legal nurse consulting, but I had for many years a very profitable and successful business supplying experts. And I can tell you, Arlene, there were things that I saw on resumes that immediately disqualified people. They didn't even get to the next step. And I will share with the people who come to the conference some of the formatting issues that I have seen on resumes, some of the common mistakes that people make that without them realizing it, they automatically take themselves out of the game. What are you going to be covering, Arlene?
Well, I'm going to be covering the red flags and landmines as you are. I'm going to emphasize that people need to know what they are so they don't have them in their own resume. But I'm also going to outline how to find those landmines, red flags, in the resumes or CVs of their opposing expert witnesses. Because I even know of a case very recently where 3 experts in a case were actually disqualified because of the way they explained their credentials, and the judge threw them out and said these people aren't qualified to testify as to what they say they're going to testify to. So they got thrown out. And if you can do that for an attorney you work with, that is an amazing thing. And even if it's not thrown out of court, there are many things that are in a resume that can cause you to that reflect on credibility of the person and make them so that the jury doesn't believe them, and that's called impeachment. So there's a lot of fodder for impeachment if you know what to look for.
Wow, that sounds critical. Think about the LNC who supplied the experts who were disqualified in those cases. All of the money that the attorney spent on the hours of work that the experts performed for the case, only to find out that they were not qualified. That's a huge waste of money.
I also wanted to add that it's important for an LNC behind the scenes, as well as for a testifying expert witness when formulating their resume or CV.
This is a vital session, whether you're behind the scenes or you're an expert witness. Join us at the link directly below this video, lnc.tips/March 2024 virtual. We'll see you there.
See you then. Thank you, Pat.
Now let's return to the show. The rule of thumb, Jennifer, is to ideally find something that's going to stay on the attorney's desk, something that is big enough that you can put your name and website or your name and phone number or email address on. Items that are small, that don't have the ability to imprint information on, are not a good use of your time. Food is not a good use of your time. If you have a bowl of candy, you can attract attorneys to your table, but then you want them to also be taking away something that's got your name on it. That could be a pen. It could be a toolkit. LNCs often give away first aid kits that go along with the theme of being a nurse. Perhaps laminated cards with information on it. There's many premium companies, premiums referring to a company that makes these types of giveaways that exist. And I found that they are very happy to send samples of something that you are considering. And they usually don't charge you anything for sending one of that type of item that you're considering, because they know if you're going to buy them, you're going to buy them in bulk. Now, that's also a consideration. If you buy something that is big, like I bought computer bags one time, and people love them, they took up a lot of space. If you've got smaller items, then how much storage space do you need, and how quickly are you going to be able to give them away? If you have boxes and boxes and boxes of things, then you've got to make sure that you're going to have space for them in your home or your office or your basement or wherever you keep them. So you want something that's not consumable. I know some people give away bottles of alcohol. I don't necessarily recommend that because some attorneys don't drink, some don't want to have alcohol around. And once the alcohol is gone, then there's nothing there for the attorney to hang on to. Attorneys don't hang on to empty bottles, as opposed to something that might sit in their possession a little bit longer. Many attorneys play golf, and golf items can be very popular. Little flashlights are popular, little toolkits. There was one time that we gave away a flashlight and a letter opener that were marked with our company name. And I found that sometimes the letter opener, which looked a little bit like a knife, made some of the attorneys uncomfortable. They thought I was giving them away a little weapon. And they didn't take them. They took the flashlights. You also have to be careful that it's not a cheap item. The flashlights had this little tab that you had to pull apart in order for the battery to then start working. Some of those tabs didn't work. Sometimes the batteries were dead. And then attorneys would come back and say, this one doesn't work. Can you give me another one? Once that supply of flashlights was gone, that was the end of that giveaway. We switched over to something different. So look at what it's going to cost you per unit. You might save a lot of money by buying 1,000 of an item. But then remember, if it costs $3 a piece, you're putting out $3,000 of money into giveaways. How long is it going to take for you to give those away? How many times are you going to be exhibiting before you end up seeing the same people who say, yeah, I already got one of them? And you do want to pick out something that's going to be universally popular. I do have to show you this. If you're watching my video on YouTube, I'm describing a two-headed pencil, which I gave away for years. Attorneys love to play with this. It's got my company name, email address, phone number on it, because it looks like a little gavel. Or I've had attorneys say, oh, it's a little stick shift, or it's a little hammer, a reflex hammer. They could play with this People would come by my booth for years and say, I want one of your pencils. And these were always popular. This is the only one that I have left after all those years of giving them away as an exhibit. So those are some of the considerations. Consider a variety of giveaways, change them up, try out new ones, see what people like. Don't get something that's heavy. Don't get something that's bulky. I saw some life care planners who complained rather bitterly. They bought water bottles, big water bottles with the straws in them. It took them years to give them away, and they took up so much space. They couldn't wait to give away their water bottles because they were just too big, too bulky.
Those are all great items to think about. I'm actually in the process of trying to choose my giveaways right now. Pat, what should you consider about the location of an exhibit?
It is ideal if you can drive there from the standpoint of being able to load up your car. First of all, do you have a car that will accept items for exhibiting? We had a station wagon that we found to be very useful for keeping all of the things in one car that need to be taken for exhibiting. Do you have to go the night before, which is going to increase your costs? Or can you get up early in the morning and drive to an exhibit and be there in time to set up before the registration starts? Is there going to be somebody at the location who will help you unload your car? If the exhibit is in a hotel, there are bellmen and bell carts, although in high demand in the morning when all the other exhibitors are arriving and unloading their cars and all wanting the bell man or bell person and cart to help them. Similarly, at the end of the day, when you want to leave, there's also a huge demand for people to assist you out the door. If you can unload yourself without a bellman and a bell cart, it's ideal, but sometimes that's not possible. If you get one of the panels, and I'm holding my hand up and pulling my hands apart that you put up on a pole, they often fit in a bag with a strap that you can put over your shoulder. So if you can put your items on a luggage cart or a hand cart, and your panel over your shoulder on a strap, you might be able to get in and out of the building yourself. And in that case, you don't have to wait for anybody to help you, which is very useful. Another thing in location is to think about how formal is the location. If you are exhibiting at a resort, for example, the attorneys and the exhibitors might be dressed down a little bit more than usual. If you're exhibiting in a hotel, you're more likely to be wearing more formal clothing. Knowing the venue is important. And also, in terms of location, do you have somebody who can come with you or meet you there? For example, if you've got a virtual assistant, you have an employee, you have a spouse, you have a good friend, somebody you can train to help you, it is ideal if you've got another person in the booth with you who can be there so that you can take turns going to the bathroom, so that you can take turns eating meals, so that you're not leaving the booth unattended. Because when you leave it unattended, there is a very good possibility that people will come along and scoop things off your table into a bag, and the things that you have left out on the top are going to disappear, which is a good reason why before you leave your table unattended, you should put things out of sight under the drapes where they won't disappear. And of course, never leave a laptop, a purse, a cell phone, anything valuable. Never, ever leave it on the top of your table and walk away from it, because it could disappear.
All great information, especially like how you point out that we should bring someone with us, a friend or an assistant to be there in case we need to step away and use the bathroom or get a sip of water. Pat, what should we know about planning a one-day event versus a multi-day exhibit?
For a one-day event, and in many senses, that's ideal because you're in and out, you're collecting information from people who are coming by your table. You're thinking in terms of the fact, as I stressed before, that not everybody is going to stop at your table. So you don't need 100 pieces of literature or 100 giveaways if there are supposed to be 100 people at the conference. You want to be sure to be there in enough time for registration because that's prime time before the exhibit starts. When people are milling around, waiting for the educational session to begin, they often visit the exhibitors during that time. In a multi-day event, most people come on the first day. And then on the second or third day, you'll see the same people walking by and they'll go, oh yeah, that's Jennifer. I've already talked with her. I don't need to speak with her again. So you don't have as much traffic. But there are also people who will come around at the very end of the day, realizing I did not speak to that legal nurse consultant. I remember walking by earlier and she was busy. I need to make sure to get her. And they might come just as you're at the end of the day, starting to pack up. And they can be some of the best visitors to your booth because they've got a sense of urgency. They want to be there. They're very curious. And that's one of the reasons why you want to stay until the very end of the day. Be sure if it's a multi-day that there is some method of locking a door, that the booths are not going to be out in a table where there's going to be traffic and people walking by. And if there is no security, then you want to make sure that everything is out of sight under the table and you leave nothing valuable. I have seen exhibitors, by the way, who walk away from their table and they leave a bowl full of cards overnight sitting out on their table. They've worked hard to get those names into their bowl for a drawing, and then they walk away and leave it. And that's something that you shouldn't do because those cards, so anybody can come along and grab those cards out of the bowl and all those leads are gone. So take away any business cards or whatever method you're using to keep track of who's coming by the booth and remove that so that it doesn't disappear overnight. And if it is a resort area, another thing to consider is, are the attorneys going to attend the educational sessions, or are they going to that resort and they're going to spend their time on the golf course, or involved in outdoor activities instead of attending the educational sessions? Sometimes it's a little harder to anticipate that or to know that they're going to do that. And the people who are running this event may not necessarily tell you, but as you get to know other exhibitors, which you can do during the downtime when the attorneys are in the sessions, you can find out, what is the annual session like for this group? Do the attorneys attend the sessions, or are they out playing or being attentive to their families instead of attending the educational sessions and meeting the exhibitors? That's another factor to consider when you start looking at an annual or a 2-day event.
Oh, great information, Pat. Thank you for explaining, what goes on at a one-day or a multi-day event, and a lot to consider in regards to, is it at a hotel or at a resort, and how to keep an eye on the things that are on our table to make sure it doesn't walk away.
Yes, those are important considerations, Jennifer. And many of these things I've learned the hard way from having exhibited at attorney conferences since the early 1990s. They could be wonderful experiences, particularly because the people who attend the conferences are typically the more senior attorneys in the law firm. They are the decision makers. They are often accompanied by paralegals or younger associates or spouses, and they are there to get to see their colleagues, to learn, and to meet the exhibitors. You get a chance to meet a lot of people in a short period, more so than if you tried to do any other form of marketing. And attorneys like to meet people face to face who they will be giving work to. So it's a great marketing opportunity. I will go into this in great detail in my conference coming up March 14, 15, and 16, 2024, when I talk about planning the exhibit in more detail, what you should put on your panels and your giveaways, how to answer questions and interact with people at the booth, and then how you follow up. Surprisingly, about 80% of the leads that exhibitors get at conferences never go anywhere. They never follow up with the people who've met them in person. So I would encourage people to come to the conference using the link right below this video, which is lnc.tips/March 2024 virtual. That's lnc.tips/March 2024 virtual. And if you see this podcast or hear this podcast after that date, we will have the recordings available. And we'll talk a lot more about exhibiting plus a whole bunch of other topics.
Thank you so much, Pat, for allowing me to co-host with you today. I look forward to attending your conference next month and, of course, taking all the advice you've given so that I could be at my first exhibit, hopefully this year. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jennifer, and I appreciate you being my co-host and being part of my coaching program and the way that you attend our coaching sessions and trainings and take advantage of the opportunities to learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, you'll have an opportunity to focus on one of the most important aspects of the lifeblood of your LNC business, which is the financial aspects, the business growth, and the recurring business. I will introduce you to a certified financial planner and a speaker at our March 14, 15, and 16, 2024 LNC Success Online Conference. That speaker is Karen Powell. Karen and I just finished recording her podcast. Karen, what is our viewer of this podcast going to get from your show?
Well, Pat, what's important is the 3 areas we spoke about that you can focus on to improve your business, and then how you can prioritize those as well. And as far as that goes, you may want to also consider the information on the recurring business that we have discussed, ways that they can get repeat business from those wonderful clients and basically develop what I call gold clients. And finally, some neglected area of that business owners often ignore, but can be also an area of gold nuggets, and that is a client survey, so that your clients realize how valuable you are to them and how their input to you is valuable and how you're orienting your business to serve them best.
We covered a lot of territory, business building strategies in this podcast. Be sure to come back and listen to Karen Powell's podcast as we go more deeply into some of the things that help build your legal nurse consulting business and give you some ideas for areas of growth. I'll see you there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Check out my resources at legalnursebusiness.com and join us for the March 14, 15, and 16, 2024 LNC Success Online Conference. Get your ticket today at lnc.tips/March 2024 virtual. I'll see you there.